Hey guys, hey, this is Anne-Marie and this is the Anti-HR channel. And today we're going to do a little story time. I'm going to do a story time. I know you guys like my little story times from my past employment because there are a lot of lessons that I've learned from things that happened to me in my 25 plus years in corporate America. And what inspired this story time? Shout out to Karen Hunter. You guys know she had me on, which I really appreciated. And I follow her now on YouTube and I watch her content. And she recently talked about and shared her thoughts on the movie Wicked. And it is in part inspired me getting this video done. I had literally written down that I wanted to talk about my HR takeaways from that movie like over a month or two ago. I saw Wicked in the movie theater in the United States over Thanksgiving. I went and saw it by myself. I like to go to the movies by myself. I don't know if anybody else does. If you do, let me know in the comments. But I've been going to the movies by myself since I was a teenager. I wasn't allowed to go to the movie theaters. My parents were Seventh-day Adventists. If you know anything about Seventh-day Adventists, you know how stringent some of their religious beliefs are. But they believed at the time that the movie theater was sinful. You weren't allowed to go to the movie theater. So when I got to be a teenager and I was old enough to drive, I would borrow my mother's car, tell her I was going to the library, and I would go to the movies. And I fell in love with the movies, sitting in the movie theater by myself, watching movies. I loved it. And so that's a little background, but I went to the movies by myself to see Wicked. And I have also seen Wicked in the theater. So I took my child to London for their 17th birthday. And I bought tickets, front row, damn near front row tickets to see Wicked. I had heard about it, read about it, wanted to see it. New York is so expensive, so I decided to go to the West End in London and see it there. And then the child decides that they don't want to go to see it. So I ended up going and seeing it on a date. Long story. That part is really, you don't need to know the details of that. But I ended up seeing it on a date in London. And it was fantastic. I can't remember the name of the actress who played Elphaba in there, but it was great. Now, I don't know how much everyone here knows about Wicked, but if you don't know, Google it. I'm not going to spend time giving you background. But basically, the short summary is, I'm not going to give a long summary, so you can Google it. But the theater and the theater show and the movie are based on a book, and I can't remember the name of the person who wrote the book. But basically, it's an alternative narrative to The Wizard of Oz. So it fleshes out the character of the Wicked Witch of the West. It basically gives the Wicked Witch of the West a backstory. And the overarching question of the movie is, in my opinion, what is evil? And that sometimes the person that you consider to be evil and wicked may have a reason for the things that they do that may not always be obvious, and that they may actually be the hero in the piece, and that the people that you see as heroes are often the villains, right? But for me, when I went to see the movie, and Karen Hunter talked a little bit about her thoughts on it, I'm not going to share that. If you want to know what Karen Hunter thought about the movie, you should go watch her video about it. I think it was really entertaining watching it. I have an opposite opinion in certain aspects because I loved the movie. I have a lot of appreciation for Cynthia Erivo's talent. I'm not necessarily a fan of hers as a person, but I don't think there's any denying her talent. Her technical ability as a singer is, to me, unmatched. I don't particularly care for people who try to compare her to Aretha Franklin or Whitney Houston or any of those people. She's not that, in my opinion. But I definitely think she is a very, very talented singer. There's no question to me from a technical standpoint, and I come from a family of people who sing. My father has an absolutely beautiful voice. Many of the men in my family have beautiful voices. And I definitely feel that from a technical standpoint, she's an amazing singer, right? And I think she did a phenomenal job in the movie. But as I watched the movie, and by the end of the movie, it really brought up a lot of emotions for me. And by the end of the movie, I was almost in tears, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it wasn't the story itself that had that effect on me. It's the memories it brought back. And I'm going to give you a story time from my experience in the workplace that really was a big takeaway for me, is the HR takeaway for me. And it just reinforced for me that as Black women at work, right, that you cannot trust anybody, first of all, because your friends are not in your workplace, and you've heard me say this before, but you especially cannot trust the Beckys, the Karens, the Christies. You can't trust them. And I don't care how much you want to and how kind they are and how much you feel you have in common with them. You cannot trust them. And that was, part of the takeaway from the movie. I don't think it was necessarily an explicit takeaway, but for me, that was what it was. I hate to do a spoiler alert, but a spoiler, but at this point, you haven't seen the movie. I don't know what to tell you. It's actually available on Peacock, so you can watch it on Peacock. It's out of the theaters now, but you can watch it on Peacock if you have Peacock. So basically, Elphaba and Glinda, who is the good witch in The Wizard of Oz, are roommates at a boarding school for wizardry, right? And over the period of the film, at first they are at odds and they don't like each other, but over the period of the film, they become friends, very close friends. And by the end of the movie, Elphaba takes a stand and decides to go in an opposite direction and to abandon the school, the people that she knows, because she uncovers a conspiracy. She uncovers something that's very evil, that's being done by the wizard. I won't say what that is. You can go watch the movie. And she makes a decision and takes a stand. Glinda chooses to side with the wizard because she wants access to his power. Elphaba is a more powerful witch than Glinda is. Glinda wants access to the power that Elphaba has that she doesn't even have. And so that song at the end, when they're singing together, is actually them separating as friends, but Glinda choosing to go one way, Elphaba choosing to go another way, right? And it brought back a memory from a work experience that I had. I was working at an organization. For the longest time, I had been carrying the responsibility of overseeing HR, finance, IT, everything, grants management in terms of the finance side of it. And it was a lot. And it was not what I had necessarily signed up for when I took the job, but I did it out of necessity because all of those functions inside of the organization were a hot mess. And at a certain point, I was pushing back on things that they were doing relevant to finance. There was a lot of unethical stuff that the management of the company wanted to do, primarily white men and white women. And I was basically standing in front of the door and saying, no, you cannot do this. And this violates, these rules from USAID. It violates these rules from your grants. And this organization had money from Rockefeller, Microsoft Foundation, you name it. And they had money from that. And they were mismanaging and misusing the money. I'm just going to be blunt. I'm not naming the company, but I'm going to say factually what was going on. And so they brought in a consultant. And really, they brought the consultant in because they wanted to sideline me. She was a friend of the president, and they wanted her to say that I was doing something wrong. But instead, she basically said that what I was telling them was true, but that she felt that at this point, the size of the company and the size of its revenue, right, required that they hire a CFO, a chief finance officer, or a director of finance, and build out their finance department. This is something that I had been telling them that they needed to do. They didn't want to spend the money, right? Another NGO, they didn't want to spend the money. So when the white lady told them to do the thing that I had been telling them to do, then they decided that they would do it. And of course, behaved as if this was their original idea and that I had never told them this. But I had told them, and I had told them in writing. So I had emails that I had sent to them. I always put everything in writing, as I always tell people, to protect myself. So the things that I told them about violating policies, breaking the law, doing unethical things, I put it all in writing to the entire management team, not just the president, but to the whole executive team. So they decide to hire someone. They hire a white woman. She is Austrian, actually. She's a naturalized citizen of the US, but she's of Austrian descent. And she had a very interesting background and story. She came in, and I'm basically the one who had to show her the ropes explain a lot of things to her. She's very introverted, and we bonded over the fact that we were both introverted people. And we became friendly, right? Even friends, I would say, or so I thought. And I helped her navigate really the first year where there were a lot of landmines, and then people were trying to set her up over and over again. And I had to give her the background on a lot of things. I gave her a lot of my emails, my notes, things so that she knew what kind of situation she was in, because she was dealing with a lot of very unethical people who would lie in your face. So she came in, and of course, now she comes in and she's telling them that they got to do all the things that I've been telling them that they needed to do, that they were resisting and pushing back and fighting me on. And she also goes out to hire people because, of course, now she needs to hire people, because there was just me and a accounting staff person. When I got there, I inherited one accounting staff person. These people had a staff of maybe 60 people when I got there. And within a year, the staff doubled to like 120. I helped them move to a new office, got them a sweetheart of a deal on a huge, beautiful office space. Then I helped them move again. I was a wizard. I was very good at what I did. But so they hired this woman. And this is, I think at the time we were in the first new space that I had put them in. And she comes in and she wants to hire at least 4 or 5 people, which was appropriate for the size of the staff and the size of the revenue, which was multi-million-dollar company, right? Millions of dollars. I think they had a revenue budget somewhere between $20 and $50 million. So not massive, but big for a medium-sized nonprofit. And a lot of that money was now U.S. government funds, and in addition to private grants and contracts. And when you have U.S. government money, there are a lot of rules about how you're supposed to manage it and compliance requirements, right? And they were out of compliance. They were doing all kinds of stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. So she comes in and she's cleaning house, and I'm coaching her a lot and giving her a lot of information. She was a CPA. She had her CPA. She's very bright. At one point she said to me, because at the time I was overseeing HR and HR was managing payroll. And ordinarily payroll should be in finance, but because I was overseeing, HR was managing payroll, and the person that worked for me was managing the payroll. And she said to me, she asked me why HR had payroll, and I told her why. And she said, okay. And then she started hiring people. She hired this white girl to be her manager of finance, a very obnoxious, redneck, racist white girl. I'm just going to put it that way. But that's who she hired. And that gave me the first inkling of who she really was, because you can learn a lot about a person just by the kind of people that they hire. And it was very clear that she had some kind of prior relationship with this girl. She brought her in, and then she hired a bunch of people of color to report to this girl, who would talk to them any kind of way and treat them any kind of way, right? And my staff person had to interact with this girl because she was doing the payroll, and the girl would be criticizing how she did payroll and so on. And it became apparent to me that they wanted to take over payroll. And frankly, I didn't even care about that, right? But what happened next was that she went behind my back to the president and the COO, complaining about how payroll was being done. She never spoke directly to me. And then I got called into a meeting where I was presented with the decision that they were going to move, that they wanted to move payroll. And they tried to present it to me as asking my opinion. And I basically said, and she's sitting in there, I come in the office and she's sitting in there with the COOs, who was another white woman. And I said to both of them, I said, here's the thing. If she wanted payroll, she could have come and talked to me. Her office is literally across the hallway from mine, right? She could have just come and talked to me and asked me. And I would have told her the same thing I'm going to tell you now. I think it needs to be transitioned in a particular way so that stuff doesn't get messed up and people's payrolls don't get messed up. But I don't have any problem with her taking payroll. Payroll should be in finance, right? But I had a problem with the fact that she didn't come and talk to me about it and instead created this narrative attacking the person who reported to me, who was a Black woman. Instead of being grateful that this person has set up a system and a process that would make it easy for it to be transitioned, instead you were trying to discredit her to create a narrative that that was the reason why you needed to move the payroll. And I called it all out and called it for what it was. And after that meeting, I never ever spoke to her again unless it was about work and about business. And it was very upsetting to me because I actually had liked her as a person. She had actually been at my house. This is somebody I had invited to. I had a thing at my house with some of my other friends, and I had invited her. So this is someone I liked, right? And this is what she did. And honestly, it's quite typical of the kind of thing that white women do in the workplace. But it was, and it wasn't like I didn't expect it because I had dealt with them before up to then. But it was still extremely disappointing. And for some reason, as I watched Wicked, all the feelings I had when I walked out of the office that day came back to me. And I just remember how betrayed I felt and how angry I was, right? And I never ever spoke to her again about anything that didn't have anything to do with business after that. And I made it very clear to her that we were coworkers and colleagues, but we were not friends after that. And she tried to come to my office and try to gloss it over. And I told her, I don't need you to explain it. I understand exactly what you did from being in that meeting and why you did it. And let us not pretend that we have any relationship beyond being coworkers. We had to still work together and interact, and we did. But I never, ever had anything to do with her again because I saw her for who she was. She was an opportunist. And she used me to position herself to where she needed to position herself. And then she sought to undermine me. And even after that, she sought to undermine me again. But then I knew who she was. So I always had my I's dotted and my T's crossed at all times so that she couldn't come for me. Right. But this is an example of why it reinforced what I knew, which was that I can't trust them, the Beckys, the Karens, and the Christies in the workplace. And it was good because it was a reminder that I needed for when I went to the next place, right? That there were things that occurred there. And I told you all a little bit about it, about the mobbing and so on. But I was ready because I was fresh off of that experience. Not fresh, but it had happened maybe a year before. And so I was prepared, but it was still very disappointing. It was deeply disappointing because this is a person I had in my home. And I could tell you, if I don't like you, you're not going to be in my house. And so I really, at a personal level, it really hurt my feelings. And for some reason, at the end of that movie, when Glinda does what she does in terms of siding with the wizard, it reminded me again of that story. And the takeaway for me was, while the movie is about widely the nature of evil and how sometimes who and what we think is evil, in this case, everyone who watches The Wizard of Oz thinks that the Wicked Witch of the West was evil. But this gives an alternative view to that story. But it also, for me, was about the ways in which Black women and white women can try to be friends, but you can never really trust them because their definition of friendship and loyalty aren't the same as ours, right? And sometimes Black women will do you the same way too. But I have found that in my personal experience, I didn't have the same experience with Black women on a consistent basis that I did with white women. Now, I did have experiences where Black women were problematic, but I usually saw them coming. And this was one of the few situations where I felt I got caught slipping. That when I went into that office and she was sitting there, I was truly caught by surprise. I did not expect to be blindsided in the way that I was. And I made sure that never, ever happened to me again in my career, ever. Right? And I've had friendly relationships probably one other time, and I'll tell you all a separate story time about that. Because I have had a friendly relationship with a white woman, even after that, and she and I are still friends to this day. But I will tell you how that managed to happen and what the difference was and what the circumstances under which I was able to have a relationship of that kind after that, right? But she's a very unique individual. But I learned, and my guard went up after that exercise, and it never came down. we laugh now about the fact that she managed to become my friend, because she knows how high my guard was up and remains up. You know, we laugh about it because she's probably one of the few white women. I think I have two women in my life that I'm friends with that are white women. And both of them had to earn it, right? And she and I laugh a lot about how she earned it, and she's a genuinely good human being. She has blind spots, because all white people have certain blind spots, but she's a person who has been able to own them and try to learn from them and try to do the right thing. In that regard, she's very rare. But I really thought that this woman and I were friends until she showed me that we were not, and in a way that really blindsided me. And so when I was watching Wicked, that for me was the takeaway. More so than the question of the nature of evil, was for me, it surfaced again the question of whether Black women and white women can be friends in the workplace. And overall, my answer to that question is usually no. It can happen, and it has happened for me, as I said, but generally speaking, my answer to that question is no. Generally, I don't think anyone can really be friends in the workplace, to be honest with you. I think people should seek their friendships elsewhere. But I have some very close relationships and abiding friendships that are 30 plus years old with women that I met at work when I was in my 20s, right? But I realize now how unique those experiences are. But I don't have any relationships except for one. In the 30 plus years that I have worked in the corporate environment, I only have one friendship with a white woman that has been able to endure, right? Only one. And the reason is that over and over and over again, they showed me that I could not trust them. That if I let my guard down just a little bit, I would be in trouble. And so what came back to me as I watched that movie was how painful the realization of that was in that particular instant. And so for me, the lesson from Wicked was about that. Not just about the nature of evil, but also about the nature of relationships between Black women and white women at work, and why it's so hard to have genuine and real relationships with them, right? And so I would be very interested in, for those who have seen Wicked, whether you understand where I'm coming from on that. I also hope that, this story time was entertaining. I know you all like to hear my story times, and I have so many. But that was what it brought back to me. It made me think back to that time at that particular job and that experience and the betrayal and how I felt and how much it hurt my feelings. And I am not a person who normally ever got my feelings hurt at work, because I never let my feelings get involved in my work. But in this particular case, I allowed myself to believe that I was friends with somebody who later showed me that they were not my friend. And so that's where the emotion came to me near the end of the movie, was from me remembering that. And it wasn't really remembering, it was remembering the feeling of betrayal. And so I loved Wicked. I do think it's worth seeing. If you haven't seen it, as I said, it is available on Peacock. And I would love to hear what other people's thoughts are about the movie. If they got any lessons that are relevant to the workplace, let me know what those are in the comments. But I hope you enjoyed this story time. And I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment, and share it with a friend. And until then, HR is not your enemy, but they're definitely not your friend. But I am. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.